welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karakura Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative as well as personal response to each and every one of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how this chapter connects to the rest of the series, foreshadowing, spoilers, things like that. So, if any of that interests you, if you're a new fan of Bleach, or if you've been reading it since the beginning, you're in the right place. As usual, these videos begin with a reading of the chapter that we are discussing for this episode. This is Chapter 79, 14 Days for Conspiracy. What is it, Renji? Has the day of my execution been pushed forward? In less than 14 days, you will be executed. I'm transferring you to the Shinzaikyu Shishinro, the Repentance Palace, 4 Deep Cell. Can you see, Rukia? Out that window. The Sokyoku. The instruments that will end your life. You may stare out that window each day and repent your crimes. That is why this is called the Repentance Palace. Your hands, please. Untie! Assistant Captain Haburai, thank you for escorting the prisoner. Now, we must go. Eh? Very well. Hey, Assistant Captain! Here's a tidbit of idle gossip for you. Yesterday, some new Ryoka entered the Soul Society. There were 5 of them, and one of them was a Soul Reaper with a sword as tall as he was. A Soul Reaper with orange hair. Bleach 79, 14 Days for Conspiracy. All these days, seeing her so alive. Ichimaru has intercepted him. Could he really still be alive? It was probably better that I didn't tell her that part. Hey! Hello? Aizen. It's good to see you, Renji. Do you have a moment? Sosuke Aizen, Captain, 5th Company. It's been a long time, hasn't it? Yes. How many years has it been since I lost you to Kenpachi? You're in the 6th Company now, aren't you? That's right, Huh? What did you want to talk about? Renji, you're close to Rukia Kuchiki, aren't you? Huh? There's no need to hide it. I know you've been friends since your days in Rukon, guy. Yes. I'll get right to the point. In your opinion, does Rukia deserve to die? I'm not sure I understand. Don't you think it's strange? Her crime was the unauthorized loan of her spirit powers and an overlong absence from the Soul Society. I've never heard of anyone getting the ultimate penalty for crimes like those. On top of that, the immediate return and disposal of her Gigai was ordered, and her stay of execution was shortened from 35 to 25 days. And of course, the use of the Sokyoku for a Soul Reaper below the rank of Captain is unprecedented. I can't help but think that someone is behind this. Captain Aizen, what are you getting at? I have a bad feeling. Renji, maybe I... All captains, report immediately for an emergency officers conference. I repeat. Cut it out! What's wrong with you guys? Attacking each other the moment you meet? Dude, you kicked me without warning. Must run in the family. But sis, that jerk! Don't talk back. Listen to me, you little punk. This is my house. It's my way, or the highway around here. I'm sorry, ma'am. All right, as long as you understand. Your sister's scary. Tell me about it. All right, everybody up. Yes, ma'am. Now then, shut your mouths and follow me. Wow, there are a lot of lights down here, but I didn't see a generator. We grow Hotoruku Zara here, in the holes on the ceiling on both sides of the wood paneling. Hotoruku Zara? Is that some kind of plant found only in the Soul Society? Okay, here we are. Ignoring Uryu. Open it, Gonshu. Yes! Did you hear? It's her way or the highway. Guess that means she can ignore us. Opening the door! Here we go! Oh, what the? What's this? It's huge. I'm going to launch you guys into Seirite with this. Through the sky! The sky! I'm Kukaku Shiba, Rukon Guy's premier fireworks expert. To be continued in Volume 10. Kukaku's House, Cultural Architecture. A few examples. Title, Handstand. Title, The Champion. Title, First Love. The latest version doesn't seem so bad now. Here's some important Bleach data. 13 court guard companies. Captain Baikua Kuchiki. 6th company. 180 centimeters tall, 63 kilograms, date of birth, January 31st. He's the 28th head of the distinguished aristocratic Kuchiki family. He wears the Kinsaikon, Pole Star Silence, an ornament allowed only to nobles, a series of semitubes that clamp to the hair. He wears Kinpaku Kazano Hana Usuginu, silvery white windflower silk gauze, a scarf worn by the generational head of the family, woven by a master weaver, the third inheritor to the Kuroemon Sujishiro. One of these costs as much as 10 houses. Likes balloon flowers, midnight walks, and spicy food. His theme song is by Giovanni Merbasi, Je chante pour passer le temps, recorded in Avanti. Probably butchered that French. I apologize. And this is Assistant Captain Renji Abarai, 6th Company of the 13 court guard companies. He's 188 centimeters tall, 78 kilograms, date of birth August 31st. From Inuzuri, Rukongai's 78th district. The 4 quarters of Rukongai are each divided into 80 districts. The higher the number, the more dangerous the district. 2,666th term graduate of Shino Reiju Suin, the Central Spiritual Arts Academy, also known as the Soul Reaper Academy. Assigned to the 5th Company upon graduating, his combat ability was soon recognized, and he was transferred to the 11th Company, promoted to Assistant Captain of the 6th Company 1 month ago. Strange eyebrows are tattoos. Likes taiyaki, a fish-shaped pancake filled with sweet bean jam. His theme song, Hazu, featuring Il Bostino no Reinu, Stray Dog, recorded in The Newborn. Captain's Badge, 6th Company Camellia design, motto, Noble Reasoning. And this was the end of Volume 10, as well as Chapter 79, the name for which, of course, the volume is named, 14 Days for Conspiracy. So let's talk about this chapter, because there is quite a bit going on. I believe that this is going to be one of the longer videos on this channel, because this introduces the secondary conflict that's central to, the story moving forward, right? So if you're not familiar, the Soul Society arc is probably the most popular in all of Bleach, and I think Bleach really owes its enduring popularity to this arc. This is the story arc that really defined what the series would be moving forward, and it's because of a lot of what gets put into motion in this arc. I think were this arc just a straightforward, typical like rescue arc with a battle manga where Ichigo and his friends have to fight through this hierarchy of increasingly difficult enemies all the way up to the captains, and then save Rukia, I think that it would still be very well received. But it's because of what starts to happen in this chapter, and honestly, as you well know, several chapters beforehand, that really leads into the story taking some very interesting turns that were unique to the manga. And I think I haven't read a shonen manga that has emulated the same sort of intrigue as well. I've certainly read other good shonen manga, don't get me wrong, but none that are focused so much on the like battle manga aspect of it, as well as pulling off these other elements. And it's part of what makes Bleach unique, and part of why I want people to be exposed to Bleach, and why I like to revisit it as well, because I'm really interested to reread all these parts. So, getting back to the beginning of the chapter, we actually, we get, I think, kind of prominently, we get the title for the chapter immediately in this first panel, and I love this focus on Rukia. She's turned away from us. We've got the bars for her cell. I don't know if the big crang of the gate opening works as well for me, but in general, manga sound effects don't really do much for me. Like, sometimes they're used effectively, but I think this panel would almost be better if it didn't have the sound effect going through it, you know? And I'll have to, the thing is also, I'm curious how much of that is, like, how much of it is actually in English lettering, or if that's a effect of the translation. I'll actually have to look at the Japanese raws, because I don't know if it was like written out as Krang by like the assistant, or by even Kubo who put that in there, or if it originally had like a I guess like a katakana or something like that, like some sort of Japanese character onomatopoeia there for the sound of these gates opening. But I think like this image is incredibly solemn and a wonderful way to open this. Just like we get the kind of cross of Rukia's chair, we get this her in this kind of prisoner outfit, and the all white that she's wearing really starkly puts her aside from the rest of the Shinigami in their black Shihakusho. And we get Rukia behind bars. That, and like this is the first time that we have seen Rukia since the beginning of this volume, if I'm right, because I think at the very beginning we see her. Renji has a conversation with her in the prison, and Byakuya shows up, and he has a little bit of a conversation with her as well. We really get the sense that her situation is not a very great one. But then we don't see her, from whenever Ichigo and Ko show up till now. And it's prominent that this is going to be at the very end of the volume, but also, and like whenever I talk about Bleach being written for the volume format, I mean things like this sort of consideration, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to have this big intrigue bit happen end of volume. So you really want to get to the next volume, right? So you have like this huge thing to lead off on. But also, like, cleverly keeping the volume title for this last chapter too. So the whole time, if you've been reading this volume, 14 Days for Conspiracy is coming up. And so whenever you finally get to this chapter, you're like, you've been wondering, like, what is the conspiracy? 14 days, like, time's relevant, right? There's only so many days left in Rukia's execution, so on and so forth. So that 14 days being visually confirmed here with Rukia. And I mean, if you were a manga reader reading it weekly, not in the volumetric format, then you would have still had that effect of 14 Days for Conspiracy, like all at once, and then also coupled here with Rukia. So immediately we get the sense of some conspiracy around Rukia's execution, there being 14 days to plot this and follow it through, maybe. And so I love this shot that we're given this point of view of coming into the cell with Rukia, and especially we get the shot of her looking over her shoulder at both us, the reader, as well as Renji, and it really puts us in this place where we're viewing her, externally. We're not seeing her as like our ally or something. We're seeing her as this person that is apart from us, is other from us, and it helps to kind of separate Rukia from being like a protagonist, where we might experience her a little bit more side on or facing or whatever, like we do with Ichigo and company. I'll try to highlight a little bit of that later. But here she is very much, it doesn't feel like it's her point of view whatsoever. You know, it feels very much like Renji's point of view for a lot of reasons. I'll get into those as we go. But I love this look back, and then Renji is followed by these other guys that, again, are distinguished by their clothing. They have like what almost look like UVs, but we come to learn these devices are to escort Rukia safely, almost like to kind of keep her bound. And so he's going to take her to the Shinzaiku Shishinro Repentance Palace, right? And I love that this also ends with like this big black bar here, like this cut down the page, because it not only it has like this descent of, you know, like these bars that line the page, like as a full page, this is a wonderful like just composition, right? You have the black bars that come down the page, lead into the straight back bars down here, and then into the all black of the bottom, which is a part of Renji's outfit. And it's representative of the thing that is trapping Rukia are the trappings of Soul Society and the Shinigami itself. That it is characters like Renji who still cares deeply for Rukia, but is a part of this system that is trapping them, right? And that he's complicit in it at this point. I guess to make a bit of an interesting analogy, one thing this reminded of, just like off the cuff, is they do the same sort of thing actually in the third Star Wars movie. Technically, I guess the sixth one, but it's you know, basically is that Return of the Jedi? Am I losing my mind? Yeah, because it's what, New Hope, Revenge of the Sith, Return of the Jedi, right? Anyway, Luke, you think that he's gone to the dark side in that film. Well, you probably don't think that. You probably know he's like the protagonist and it's just all an act. But he wears all black, right? And that's supposed to signify like him allying himself with Vader. But as we come to find, you know, he's still got some white underneath that, right? So he's really still a good guy. But it's supposed to, like, that costuming, especially whenever you're playing with these like really heavy tones that anybody can pick up, like blacks and whites, you know, especially with the way that Soul Society is represented through these blacks, or like Darth Vader is this all black ominous character, right? He is the Sith incarnate. Palpatine's covered in black robes, and so whenever Luke shows up in all black, you're like, uh-oh, you know, what's going on here? Is he infiltrating? What's happening? And I think we're very much supposed to get the same sense from just these panels alone. We have the black of the bars entrapping Rukia. We have them coming down the page, and we have the black of Renji's Shihaku show. And I love that stuff. I really do. We also get, of course, I think very keenly, in the same page that we get the title drop of the 14 days for conspiracy, we get Renji mentioning in less than 14 days he'll be executed. So immediately that parallel is drawn for us if we haven't made it already. I really like that these next few pages take this time, just no speed troubles. A lot of people would complain about Bleach being quick to read or easy to read, or, you know, I always remember this, you know, a new chapter come out and people would be like, oh, I finished that in like 30 seconds. So insubstantial. And I think it's like, you know, to an extent, maybe that's a valid complaint for some people, but I really, really like whenever Kubo doesn't feel like he needs to fill the page with dialogue, whenever he can just be visually engaging. And I know, like, you know, maybe these structures and everything, and it's not the most detailed art, right? Kubo isn't really well known for, in fact, often gets goofed on for, like, the backgrounds in the world not being designed in a way that's compelling. And I don't know that I agree. I like there's an emptiness to Kubo's world that I think fits it well enough. I really like the rigid, like, sort of, pardon the pun, hollow structures. It's not even making any sense. But I like that there's this dispassionate architecture in the Soul Society. That we go from like the human world where things feel very kind of lived in. Characters on the banks of a river at like at a big festival. You know, we have characters running around in these urban environments, school, things like that. You know, picking up desks, etc. And here we have these monolithic structures, these looming white buildings, these long bridges to, you know, pivot towers, right? And I think that that's another thing that often gets overlooked whenever it comes to like people lending a kind of critical eye to Bleach. It's so easy for people to write off the setting I think that's the biggest thing that people feel like they're justified in writing off about Bleach or justified in criticizing about Bleach. That the setting itself doesn't work, and I disagree so heavily. It's not super rich and detailed. I mean, if you're looking for background art that's going to blow you away, go read Berserk, right? And that art works for that setting because it's very fantastical and trying to evoke this rich world filled with cruelty as well as beauty, right? The fairy realms and all of that. But if you're reading Bleach, you're not like when you go to Soul Society. The point is that Soul Society is this militaristic, hierarchical, like kind of dismal place, despite being the afterlife. And if that seems like an issue to you, if that's like troubling, that's the point. That they could live in such a place and feel like that's normal, right? Because it's been so ingrained in their culture. Um, yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think that like those are decisions that were made because I think here's the thing: a lot of people I think assume that the background art and all of that is incidental, that it's not a decision that was made, explicitly to evoke something. So whenever they see a panel like this, where we only get like really three structures and like this bridge connecting them, there's not really a lot going on in this top panel. A lot of people write that off as maybe like lazy, as maybe being like a little too simplistic. And for me, I think it gives me this sense of scale, this sense of this looming foreboding kind of isolation that Ruki is going through. And yeah, I think that it's clever that they also surround her with these taller, guards that are completely masked up. Like their identity has been entirely shrouded, and they are as monolithic as the tower that they're bringing her to. They even have like the little slit, just like she does in the tower, for viewing this cruel world around them. And that's like the only kind of like feature that they have really in their clothing. And I think that's intentional. That's meant they're meant to mirror the place that she's being brought. Also, kind of telling is that she's brought there by this collar that is chained essentially to these four staffs. That she's essentially brought like out like a dog. She's even tied up and everything. And it's kind of wild. Like I love this sequence for just how ominous it is, and like Renji really not seeming like he's taking any pleasure in this too. Like he really doesn't want to have to go through this. But again, because he's such a high ranking member of this society, because he's a part of this system, he begrudgingly does so because he thinks that's what he has to do. That if he doesn't, he'll have to face the repercussions of going against this system. Repercussions that are seeing his friend killed. So yeah, it's rough stuff and it's wonderful. And again, as simplistic as this sort of structure might be, you could be like, oh, they could have made a way cooler tower to lock her in. It's like, no, part of why this works for me is that it's not cool. It's like this is a prison structure. Like this is meant to be kind of awful. And I like that like that comes across. There's a certain amount of understanding there. And now, what I will say is that Bleach overall doesn't have, as the manga would continue, we're going to spend a lot of time in Soul Society, obviously, and it's going to be a bit different from the human realm. But I wish there was more variety to kind of help these these decisions about the setting stand out even more. Because I think what people do is they start to gloss that and stop feeling like it's in like a decision that was made and why that decision is made, and stop really considering the details of the world and start glossing it over whenever they start to get familiar with it. And I think having more variety would have helped spice it up, but also would have really helped to distinguish, these places as significant in their design, rather than starting to feel like, more comprehensively that way. Which again, I like that comprehensive nature of it. I like that a lot of Soul Society feels this way, even if it makes it feel less unique, because that's kind of the point. But I could see how for the average reader that might more easily let them kind of gloss over this and be like, oh yeah, the setting in Bleach sucks. like the setting in Bleach isn't that interesting. Um, especially whenever you have. I'm trying to think of places that really happen to contemporaries. I mean, like there's like the Valley of the geez, now what is it called? The Valley of the End in Naruto, which has like the two big ninja statues. That's pretty iconic. I mean, Naruto's whole starting setting in the Leaf Village. I think the Leaf Village is a pretty iconic setting with the different Kage carved into the mountain. Like stuff like that is pretty interesting and visually gripping immediately. But then you think about like Naruto's first story arc takes place in like the woods, nets, and docks, like on a bridge. Like uh, the Chunin exam is in some more woods in a room. Like you think a lot of like Naruto's first arcs, and it's like they don't really do much with that setting. Same thing, I say same thing with One Piece. One Piece does do a lot between the different islands. I think One Piece exemplifies the sort of world building that people more regularly respond to in a positive way, because you don't have to stay in any one place too long, unlike Bleach. Like we were in the human world for like 70 chapters, and we're going to be in Soul Society for quite a while too. Like 70 chapters, that's over a year of publication. Whereas like I feel like in One Piece we get to new islands quick enough, and that we traverse to these like very different locales enough, and it's kind of like, okay, I have to figure out the rules of how this works, or like what the structure of the society is here, and that freshness kind of maybe helps distinguish each area and then keep it fresh constantly. And so I think it's easier for people to feel like, oh, it's more and it's more different, and so therefore it's better. And that's not always the case. You have to ask, like, what is this achieving? What if this is an intentional choice, what's the point of this choice? What is it achieving narratively? Is that effective? Is that working for me? And if it's not working for you, it's not working for you. I mean, I can't say anything, but I've always felt like Bleach's setting really worked for me, and especially in reevaluating it and looking over it like this, it's striking how effective it is for me. Anyway, I love this. This scene is really well animated in the anime, but also I think is fantastically done here in the manga. I love the zoom in, and we just see Rukia's expression with her lips there, as like these like the like tubes that were going into her neck pop off, and they all pull away at these chains that pull away this veil that was hiding the way to get here from where she was kept. Which assumably she would know, like she's probably intimately familiar with the Soul Society. She's lived here for over 100 years, and yet, she's still treated in this way and carried in this way. And then, yeah, the whole idea is that this room's completely featureless, save for the window that lets you view the instrument of your destruction, the Sokyoku, which is this incredibly large, like, halberd, and essentially, like, I guess it looks like a gallows almost. Yeah, the Sokyoku. And it's curious, like, what, like, is somebody just run her through with that? What's going to happen? So, like, I think that ends up being kind of evocative too, that at the top of this hill there's just this massive thing that just stands there. Is it always there? Has it been prepared for the execution? Like, those are the sorts of answers that I don't think we have. I mean, honestly, I believe it's always there, but the way that, like, the also really effectively here, the shading in the clouds is all shaded from the Sokyoku as our central point. So, like, it's like this is kind of our, well, more like closer to the horizon, but like kind of right here is our focal point, and you'll see that all the shading radiates out from there and sweeps our eye towards like the middle of it and like this kind of area. And we really, part of that is the fact that it extends up beyond that, kind of draws our eye unnaturally up the awkward like size of the thing, right? So it's this monolithic sort of structure, and I love that we get this view of it on the hill out from there. Yeah, the Sokyoku is kind of interesting. We'll learn more about it as we go further in the series, but that will be where she'll be executed. So, like, the idea of, like, for 2 weeks, just like, oh yeah, that's where they're going to kill you. That's what they're going to kill you with, is kind of also super morbid. And again, people don't think about, like, I've seen people talk about Bleach's setting and write it off 1,000 times, and never do they bring up like things like the Sokyoku. They don't consider that like an aspect of the Soul Society or the world for whatever reason, like as if like it's not like a feature, as if it's not like something very tangible that, as we know, Soul Society has these authorized executions that, are meant to punish lawbreakers. There's this very, legalistic, militaristic society. And so, of course, they have this huge ceremonial, like execution site. And it gets mentioned later that it's usually reserved for captain class and higher. So, like, maybe they have smaller execution sites, but this is the big one. This is like, we're going to execute you in front of the White House, kind of, like we're going to bring you out in front of everyone, and this is what's going to destroy you completely and positively, right? It's capable of even killing a captain. The highest ranking officials here that are assumedly the most powerful, right? So that's fascinating. And that's a part of the world and a part of the world building that, like, what society has a device like that? The Soul Society, heaven. And like that I think is infinitely more fascinating than like, yeah, dude, what's in the Sand Village? Like, check out Innis Lobby though. Well, yeah, Innis Lobby is one that a lot of people praise, and it's pretty good. But like the same thing with like Skypedia, but you have to take hundreds of chapters to get there, right? Am I losing my mind? I guess Arlong Park you get pretty early. A lot of people like Arlong Park, but anyway, I'm talking about One Piece for those that don't know, and like some of the settings there that are really like gripping. But we don't send like, and I think maybe that's another problem that I have with One Piece's settings is they feel isolated a lot of the time. So it's like, yeah, we can go to Arlong Park, but what are we gonna do? Like we return to some islands sometimes, but they feel less a part of the world and more like isolated storybooks. And it's like, whenever you write your series like that, yeah, you can come up with what the fuck you want, because your world doesn't have to be consistent. Your world doesn't have to follow any rules, rhymes, or structures. Whenever every new adventure can be a completely new island that you can come up with anything that you fucking want for it. Whereas like Bleach tries to create a consistent world with a very large kind of scope to it. And that is going to rely on you spending a little bit more time in the same place. And whenever the same place is, like I said, has these kind of stark, very, not a lot of difference between their structures. I mean, obviously the Sokyoku is pretty different from everything we've seen so far, but whenever there is this consistency that's supposed to be sort of isolating and sort of, meant to make you feel in those ways, yeah, you're going to be less crazy about it. But I mean, like the Soul Society with its walls and the Sokyoku Hill and like the different barracks, I think that's an iconic setting too. I think anybody that has read Bleach, you can just show them that in silhouette, and they'd be able to tell you like, oh yeah, that's Soul Society, that's the Serite, So maybe not as iconic as the the Leaf Village perhaps, but I don't know. I feel like people might be able to name the Leaf Village without having read Naruto at all. Whereas I don't know if people would be able to name the Serite. Certainly not name it like Soul Society or Serite, but maybe identify it as from Bleach, perhaps. But again, stop harping on that point. So yeah, we get this mention from this kind of guard guy, this guy that like executed, this guy that escorted Rukia this way. That the idea is that the point of this place is to stare out the window every day, repent your crimes, right? Which is kind of wild because you think about it, it's like, what's the point of repenting for my crimes here if I'm just going to be killed, right? And so you have to wonder, it's like, okay, well, is my soul going to be cycled, but then do I even still get to keep any of my memories, right? Because Yuichi certainly does. Yuichi was offered Kanso and comes here. But if a soul is sent from the Soul Society back to the human realm, I assume they forget everything that they know, right? Because babies are born and we don't remember memories from a previous life, and that hasn't been shown anywhere in Bleach. So I think the idea is that people forget who they were before they've reincarnated in that way, before they've entered that cycle. Coming from the Soul Society. And that's something that you can extrapolate just from, again, the setting consistently being depicted that way. You don't need a person to explain to you hey, you lose your memories whenever you become a human, because literally none of the humans in the series are shown to have memories of living in soul society despite there being a cycle of souls. Easy peasy, pumpkin parcheesi. So, maybe the repentance is like, perhaps it'll, do something to your soul, right? Maybe perhaps in the next life you'll not commit these crimes because, your soul will be repented to an extent. But there's other things to consider here too. Like, I feel like it's much less about repentance or like some sort of soul restitution or whatever, or I guess uh like making your soul better. I think it's much more just about the formality of it and having everyone else see what you have to go through, and like the suffering of, really putting these criminals on display, and like, oh yeah, then they had to spend 14 days washing, the Sokyoku, and they have to go and repent, and you don't want to do that, don't be a criminal, kind of thing, right? I think it's as much for everyone else as it is, even more for everyone else than it is for Rukia. But here you can see that they use some sort of, maybe Hado or something like that, or Keto. What am I saying? Hado. Keto, some sort of, just untie and unties this. Maybe it's just a part of, again, this neck thing, because this all gets sucked up from her arms into the collar she has around her neck. So it's an interesting little device, and kind of, again, sort of like the clock on that guy's back, sells this as like a different world with like different kind of technology and rules, which I think is fascinating. Again, world building. Like, what kind of world has to build these kinds of shackles? One that has these kinds of prisoners, Anyway, I like that they thank Renji for escorting Rukia, like as if she tried to make a break for it, like, he would have to stop her and cut her down, which is kind of makes sense, especially they bring high profile, like captain level prisoners here, right? Um, but I like that before, because he's like, hey, we must go, and they have to vacate it. But before they do, he like turns around to like tell her this, right? And I love, like, there's such a great interaction, like the paneling of it, the way that he comes in from the right side of the page over, grabs her far shoulder, and he's like, yeah, I've got this idle gossip, and informs her, about these people that are invading. But then there's this moment of pause before he decides to tell her that it's Ichigo, right? Before, like, and then like and I love as he tells her that, this lightness falls over her hair, and it kind of ripples down through her, and I love the way that her hair becomes sketchy here, and that she becomes almost ephemeral, and she has this shock of realizing that Ichigo is here in the Soul Society, that even though she told him not to come, that she would like that he would be killed, that she hated him and all that, right? That, like, all the stuff that she said, despite all of that, he is here, and like the effect that it has on Rukia and the way she looks in this panel, like, it gives me chills. I love the drawing, the way that the hair is done, especially like kind of falling off her shoulder from like just the shock of like her like looking around quickly like that. It's fantastic. Like, this is like a masterfully done panel, wonderfully done, like executed, like emotional moment. And I think it's really resonant, especially again because this entire time we've had Renji being kind of our point of view character, right? Where the whole time that we're watching Rukia kind of from Renji's perspective almost. So we get him walking in. We're in Renji's perspective. We have this kind of interaction with Rukia. We see Renji here. We see her walking. We're kind of in profile with them. Now we're behind Rukia. Now we're where Renji is kind of watching. He's watching her being unveiled. Here we're behind Renji. We're over the shoulder. We're getting this perspective of him. So we're very much point of view Renji, and we continue to be because we leave the scene with him too, and that's significant, right? That Rukia gets left here as Renji leaves. But yeah, we get this other shot back over, and then never do we have like a Rukia addressing Renji where we've got her as point of view. We don't get any internalization from her. Renji is really the one leading the action of this scene, especially here, where he finally goes to confront her, finally goes to tell her this, and I love this moment. Like, as great as the moment with Rukia is, I love like this expression for Renji, this guy that we've only known so far as like this kind of hot-headed guy, especially considering like the way he was with Ichigo in their fight. I think Kubo gives Renji so much depth in this moment, like this, because he's think about it. This is his good friend. He has feelings for Rukia, as we come to find, right? Like whenever Aizen confronts him about it, he gets a little shy, right? But like he clearly like grew up with this girl. He clearly has some sort of feelings for her. How intimate those roll, we don't know yet. But she's someone that he's very close to, that he's known for like a lot of his life, and we know how old Rukia is. So like imagine being like having your best friend, right? You might have known them for what, like 10, 20 years, depending on how old you are, right? Imagine having a best friend that you have had for over 100 years since you were a child, and that you've lived together in the same town your whole life. You got a job working for the same people. You work with her brother. He's your boss. Like imagine that. And then imagine that you have to be complicit in them being sent to prison and then killed. Like, that's got to be crushing, right? And the idea that, like, Renji here, I think he wants to, he realizes how dire this situation is. He realizes that the whole point of this is to basically break down her soul before she even gets killed. She's going to have 14 days of just being in this featureless room, and the only thing that she can look at is the instrument of her destruction as she thinks about everything that led her here. And so instead of letting her just live there with her despair and stare out into, like, instead of a sun on the horizon, this gallows, Renji has this moment where he urgently tells her that, like, there's some invaders, but then he pauses because he knows that telling her about Ichigo, he doesn't know how she's going to react, but, like, in a way it's almost like he knows that's going to give her hope or something to hold on to that isn't this isolation, right? And so, like, it's something that, like, troubles him, because it's like, well, if she's going to be executed, what's the point of telling her anyway, right? If he's going to be killed before he even reaches her, that's only going to trouble her more, right? Like, this is, from Renji's point of view, like, he knows how weak Ichigo was. He knows that Baikyua could have killed Ichigo and was making a mockery of him. Like, he knows the score. And so Renji, knowing this, knowing that Ichigo is almost certainly going to die here, despite all of that, knowing that, like in this moment, like he's recognizing that this isn't going to work out, that if he tells her this, it could crush her even more, and that would be the saddest thing ever. And despite that, because he has this connection with her, because he believes in something more and that hope that Ichigo's bringing, he tells her and gives her that gift. And I think that's like one of the most beautiful moments that I would have never expected from this character. And like I'm tearing up even thinking about it, because like I don't think of Renji, like I've read this, the whole manga before. I typically don't think of Renji as this very emotionally centered character. At least in retrospect, I didn't until this reread. I tended to think of Renji the way that we saw him originally, this kind of like, like very, very loud and boisterous. He's got the flaming red hair, and like, yeah, he has very emotional scenes, but like there's a sensitivity here that is often not the case with his raw passion that we see, and there's a consideration here that I think speaks volumes to the depth of this character. And it's done so subtly and so well within so few panels, and we don't get internalization. We don't spend too much time. Like, I spent over 10 minutes here gushing about this interaction, but like it's literally a page. It's literally like just bop a few panels, and that's what it means to be an effective mangaka. That means what's what it is to make good manga, and for this art form, like these beats, these moments, and I think this is something that works really well in the manga that you can't get in the anime, because the anime you can't sip these moments. You can't really, like, the space of this beat. Like, if these panels were closer, this beat wouldn't feel like it's like as long as a pause of like Renji just having this little moment of silence, really thinking to himself, considering like, shit, should I tell her this? And the fact that he knows how it's going to affect her, and the fact that he knows like the consequences it might have, and that even knowing that, he tells her anyway, and then the huge reaction she has, like, whew, Ooh, talking about, yeah, no, I've it's got me choked up. Like it's legit. It's a beautiful moment that like I think also underpins like a bit of Renji kind of maybe even having a bit of development where he believes in the hope that Ichigo can bring. Whereas before, he was openly mocking Ichigo and mocking Rukia for like, there was this sort of thing where he's like, you don't say that sort of thing, right? Where he like held her down. And then she had to kind of come around to that Soul Society thing to protect Ichigo, right? That whole like looking down upon humans and kicking Ichigo's hand away from grabbing at Byakuya's, like pant leg, right? Like, don't touch my brother kind of situation, with your filthy human hands, whatever she says. But like the fact that there's this like they essentially try to protect themselves by adhering to the cruelty of the system, and here Renji breaks from that for just a moment. He's able to kind of escape that cruelty, and it's thanks to the hope that Ichigo brings. And I think that's like, and the fact that that's also centered in Ichigo, this person that we know has been an antagonist for Renji, and even perhaps, if you want to read it that way, a potential romantic, antagonist as well. Though I don't read Ichigo and Rukia as having a romantic sort of situation. Though I know there's certainly people who would read this as like a kind of triangle, right? But I mean, I know there are people that read it that way because I've been a part of this fandom since day one. There are definitely people who read it that way. I personally don't. I think that the relationship Ichigo has to Rukia is much more one of like allies and friends rather than it is one of romantic interests. But I think that there is still, maybe for Renji, that's still something he perceives, that he sees Ichigo perhaps as a threat to this person that he holds dear. If not like romantically, at least in some way, you know? And so he, like the fact that he tells her this anyway, like to give her some amount of hope, to like do something for her, it's incredibly telling of their relationship as well as Renji's own development from the way that we've seen him so far. Anyway, here's the chapter cover, which I forgot about this one too. This is such a phenomenal like cover. I mean, like just like not only the thick line work that really sets it apart, and the way that like the kind of there's these the not full blacks but these kind of mid-tones used for both Rukia's hair and her eyes. I really like whenever Rukia's eyes kind of get depicted in those same sort of mid-tones, like her eyes, eyelashes, and everything. Get hit with the same mid-tones as her hair. We'll see that sometimes in stylizations of her, and it's wonderful anytime that that's done. I don't know, it works really well. I think it speaks to a little bit of the strength of her design. But yeah, just like the blocking of this, the 14 days for conspiracy, this like gritting out, like Rukia being bound and essentially gagged. She's unable to kind of have a voice. She's unable to have any sort of power. She's essentially been put into this submissive position by the Soul Society. And, as much as like, I will have to bring up here, talking about like having a damsel in distress, right? Because that's very much a significant part of this arc, that they're going to go and rescue Rukia, and she is a woman that is being held prisoner in a tower. Like, don't get me wrong, that's definitely meant to evoke a few of those sort of stereotypical, sort of patriarchal, like structures. That said, Rukia is a character that is here of her own volition. Don't ever forget that. She chose to be imprisoned to protect Ichigo's life. She wasn't captured against her will, necessarily. She could have died in that encounter. She could have, done a lot. There could have been a lot of different ways that went. And, like, her intention was to just run away and for Ichigo not to get wrapped up in any of this anyway. And her intention, and, like, she knew that she was going to be executed from the moment she gave Ichigo his powers. So, like, and she never intended to be in this sort of situation to be saved. She intended to be executed for that. She intended to basically trade her life for the life of this person that he saw that was willing to die for his family and his sisters. And we come to find the irony is that Byakuya, her brother, is willing to let her die for the sake of the society, that he is not going to save his own sister. And I think that's sort of the whole point, that Rukia, she sees this thing in Ichigo, that this justice, and this individuality and this passion for other life and for these bonds that maybe she's sorely been lacking her entire life, and that she wishes she could help kind of continue to exist. And I think that's part of why she gives Ichigo his powers. Other than, what else were they going to do? Get killed by Fishbone D like a bunch of chumps? No way. Anyway, so as much as you could frame this as, oh yeah, Ruki is a damsel, etc., etc., I don't agree. I think she has complete agency in being a part of this. And so, yes, it maybe speaks towards the fact that these powerful men are putting her in this position, and that it is certainly a male character that is disrupting her agency. But ain't that true to life? I don't think that speaks towards like being complicit in that system. I think it speaks towards the failings of a system. I think if anything, Bleach is starting to damn a system that would do this sort of thing to a woman, especially a woman like Rukia. So, I don't like there are people that will call Bleach misogynist. Those people are wrong. They did not read Bleach, and if they did, they did not read that Bleach all too critically. They read it with a bias going in, trying to just get what they wanted out of it. I think if you read it honestly, you're not going to see that. And I know I have my biases too, So if you disagree on this subject, feel free to hit me up on it in the comments. I'm willing to chat about it because I think it is an interesting kind of avenue of discussion. It's something that Kubo's definitely playing with here. Because this is meant to be an unjust society. This is meant to be one that unfairly punishes people and that chambers them. And I don't think it's gendered nearly as much as you could read it as it is, Anyway, yeah. I love this like little moment, where he's thinking about Gin, and he's like, well, if Gin intercepted Ichigo, could he really still be alive, right? Because Gin's a captain. And Renji's not even a captain, and he was able to fight Ichigo to kind of a standstill, right? So it's like, well, and I like that we get this internalization after the fact, that Renji's sort of kind of regretting it, that it's probably like because he did withhold that Gin intercepted Ichigo, and as we saw from the little interlude, we saw that Renji was there to witness that. So Renji firsthand knew that yes, Ichigo was there, and yes, Gin intercepted him. And I wonder what Renji would have done if Ichimaru Gin wasn't at the gates. I wonder what Renji would have done if it was Renji that ran into Ichigo after the Jidambo encounter. You really have to be curious. Like, would Renji have fought him, or would Renji have been like, "Yeah, let's go save Rukia"? I think this is a moment that maybe helps you think that, like, because clearly Renji's really conflicted about his place in all of this. But yeah, this idea of like, could he really still be alive? And already he's thinking, well, it's good that I didn't tell her about Ishimaru because then she might think that Ichigo's dead, and that's what he wants to avoid. So whenever I talk about like Renji told her that to give her hope, it's confirmed here because he didn't tell her the other part that he might be dead already, right? He wants her to believe that Ichigo is alive and out there and coming to help her. I mean, that's really sweet. You're a sweet dude, Renji. Also, your hair is kind of wild. But yeah, here we get introduced to yet another new character. This is Captain Sosuke Aizen, the captain of the 5th Division, I believe. It's going to tell us. But, shows up, and I love how disarming he is whenever he shows up, that he's just like, hey, Renji. And as we come to find out later in this, Renji used to work for the 5th Division, right? The 5th Company. I guess translated as company here, but typically the Soul Society, the 13 court guards, or the 13 captains, the 13 divisions is usually the parlance that people use. Division tends to be the way that it typically gets translated nowadays. But I love that we get, this guy with glasses. He's got kind of, shaggy hair. He seems well enough put together, fairly handsome sort of individual. But like not like we've seen Captain Zaraki Kenpachi, right? We've seen the nobility that Bayuki Kuchiki puts on. We've seen the kind of playful yet sinister Ichimaru again. And so it's interesting here to get this guy Aizen, who is like, kind of like approaches Renji. I think it's really neat the turn that happens here, where he approaches Renji kind of smiling and like, hey, do you have like a moment? And he's not making a big deal about it. But whenever he gets Renji alone, he's like, hey, something fucked up's going on. And I love that. I love that turn. That he's. I think Aizen, if anything, is shown here to be really aware of the perceptions people have, and to be really aware of the way in which like really quickly we get the sense that this is a character that is, he knows. Obviously, he knows more than he's letting on. He's literally telling Renji that he has those sort of suspicions, but we really get the sense of this character that is aware of his surroundings, even if he doesn't maybe even seem like it. So it's a little bit smarter than maybe we might expect on initial give, and then he's willing to kind of have these sort of casual conversations and carry along that way. But I love that also here we cut from these rather open sort of scenes to being in this kind of claustrophobic room with all these things stacked up. As Aizen kind of just almost ducks into a storage room to tell Renji, this information, right? It's interesting here that he says, "I lost you to Kenpachi," right? And so we learn here, he lost him to Kenpachi, now he's Sixth Company. And at the end of the volume, it's told to us in the character data, but we can gather here that basically Renji used to be in Aizen's division. He used to work for Aizen. So, they must have had a fairly close relationship, right? They must have known each other. I mean, it's his boss, even if he wasn't a high-ranking member at the time. And then he became a part of Kenpachi's division, almost certainly because Renji, as we saw, how excited he got in the fight, right? Kenpachi's, all about fighting. Kenpachi's like the battle division, right? The 11th, I believe, right? And so, now he's in the Sixth Company, which is this much more the nobility of that is led by like noble righteousness, right? They go and detain the criminal Rukia, and so they're involved in that sort of situation. Although they were given permission to go and detain her because of their relationship to her, so maybe that's not something that the Sixth Company normally does. But I do like the idea that maybe the Sixth Company does uphold the law of Soul Society a little bit more than the other companies do, because it's headed by Yukio Kuchiki, who is such heavy into the law, right? But I love that it's he's the lieutenant, he's the vice captain of the Sixth Division. So I love that Aizen's just like, oh yeah, you're in the Sixth Company now, aren't you? And it's like, yeah, dude, you're a captain. Like, there's only 13 of these things. Like, you should be aware. And it makes you kind of wonder, the size of Soul Society and the scope of it, and how much. Certainly, you have to kind of be aware of like who at least as an audience member, you're going to be aware of the lieutenants and the captains. But I wonder how much like kind of interaction between divisions you typically get. And Aizen has these sort of insights because he's perceptive, but also because he has this personal history with Renji. I mean, like, Renji became a Soul Reaper, graduated from this academy, and entered this division immediately, right? So it was like his up and coming kind of division. But I love that Renji's kind of thrown off by this. He doesn't know what Aizen's kind of brought him in this room to talk about, and he kind of quickly gets to the point. And I think it speaks towards the difference in what these characters are like, where Aizen's kind of like this chatty, sort of like catty guy, who's willing to kind of take a little bit to catch up, take his time to talk to you before he gets down to business. Whereas like Renji is a very direct character, and we can see it almost like he's maybe still distressed from what just occurred in the encounter that he had with Rukia, but he is like not having it, and he's very direct, and he gets to the point. And I like that kind of that disparity between the characters. As that happens, that back and forth, Aizen just smiles because I think he appreciates that Renji knows something's going on, right? And then he immediately talks to that, and so I think it speaks towards Aizen having this kind of emotional intelligence, maybe, that we might not know of, like that, like, might not immediately be apparent. But the fact that like he immediately, it almost feels like Aizen, like, especially considering what he says here, Aizen must have come here because he knew that Renji would be the one escorting Rukia, because she was kept in the 6th barracks, because Byukyu was busy with everything else that he was busy with and wasn't going to see her until the execution. So like, Aizen almost certainly intentionally came here to tell Renji this, because he knows Renji, the person who worked for him from a young age, that came from the Rukon guy along with Rukia, must be close to her, right? He's known this guy for quite a while, like since he was training to be a Shinigami. And he even mentions as such, that they've been friends. And I love that he draws this curtain, isolates them, and then we get this really close shot of his eye as he expresses, does she deserve to die? And that's something that obviously Renji's got going through his mind, right? That he's got these misgivings about the Soul Society. And so immediately we might start to think about 14 days for conspiracy. Is there going to be a conspiracy against Soul Society, right? And then immediately that conspiracy thing that we're wondering about gets answered by Eisen as well. That Eisen launches into this like, hey, well, don't you think the circumstances relating around Rukia's execution are strange, right? And so he brings up the crime itself, and then he brings up like, look, that's like a way more severe punishment, and especially like the situation around her Gigai. So as we know from one of the first scenes that we had in Soul Society, her Gigai was made by Kisuke Urahara, and there was something startling about it. And so that's something that we might have had in the back of our mind. And it's an easy thing to forget, but notably Rukia's Gigai, her strength wasn't returning to her. Despite all that time, she wasn't getting her powers back. And so what machinations did Urahara have in this, right? And so automatically we're starting to think, okay, there's something going on with her Gigai. We know her Gigai was weird. It was unusual. It was keeping her power from coming back. What was going on with that? The 12th have it now, right? Or is that the Science Division? I'm getting mixed up. Anyway, Science Division has it now. So it's like, okay, we know there's something significant about that. But then also the execution was shortened by 10 days, which again, time being as significant as it is. And then we also get this mention of the Sokyoku used on anyone below a captain rank is something that's never happened, right? And so it's like this sort of punishment that Ruki is being given, like being killed by such a powerful device. The circumstances around her Gigai and the shortening of her execution, like someone wants to get rid of Rukia really quickly. And Eisen is like, okay, this is pretty suspicious, he's figuring somebody in the Soul Society is behind this, right? There's got to be somebody pulling some strings. And so now it's like, okay, well, the conspiracy maybe isn't even a conspiracy against Soul Society so much as it's a conspiracy to get rid of Rukia for some reason. And what does that have to do with Urahara? What does that have to do with, our protagonist as he's caught up in all this, right? Ichigo. But also, like, ultimately, what role does Rukia play in this? How aware is she of any of this? Because Rukia has always been someone who's withheld information from, essentially us, the audience. So we start to, like, wonder immediately, and this is the arc that I was talking about. This is the plot that I was talking about that I think is so fascinating, and that a lot of people tend to love the Soul Society arc for, is this arc that really gets the ball rolling with Eisen here, and with Renji, and with Rukia. This sense that not everything's right in Soul Society. Someone's clearly manipulating the events around Rukia's execution. What do they have to gain for it? Why are they doing it? And we have all these different characters that we can start to suspect. So it becomes almost like a murder mystery, but like obviously the murder hasn't been done yet. The execution hasn't taken place. And it's like if we can maybe solve this before the execution. So now no longer it's a time limit of, hey, we have to save Rukia before the execution. We got to go do a bunch of fights. It becomes this entire deduction manga of like, okay, yeah, who's pulling the strings? And I think that is infinitely fascinating. And I think it's no surprise that this character Eisen is the one to finally to bring this to the fore. This character that we just get introduced to, and so he's kind of like a blank canvas to share this information with us, right? And he approaches us, and we get this sense that he has these suspicions, but he's not quite able to suss out the truth himself, which I think is fascinating. Like that, like he comes to Renji because he knows of Renji's connection to Rukia, and he's hoping that Renji, with that connection, might have some insights that he doesn't have, right? So I think it's a smart move on Eisen's part, but Eisen's not quite, he doesn't have the whole picture, and I think that's also fascinating too. So there's clearly, there's something going on, and I love that, he starts to say like, I have a bad feeling, and then he starts to like, maybe he's like, well, maybe maybe he's overstating, maybe he's overthinking it, maybe maybe like, it isn't quite as dire as he suspects, and then he gets interrupted by this calling for all the captains to meet, emergency officers conference. All captains have to go and meet, so Eisen needs to go and leave for this conference, right? So he gets interrupted by this emergency conference. So you can't quite tell Renji what's going on. I also do like, a little note here, Renji still does have the little scar from his battle with Ichigo. Anyway, while that's going on, we immediately cut, and like, there's so much, like, it's like, I want to go see the conference, I want to go see all the captains, I want to know what Aizen had to say to Renji, you know? And in that moment, we're brought back to our other plot, like our A plot, B plot, right? So we're hurtled back into this action plot of, you know, the battle manga plot. And I think coupling those two plots, it allows one to have a breather and you to build tension with one while the other one's delivering on things, right? Because before this point, you know, we were just excited about Kukaku Shiba and how are they going to get into the Soul Society and what's going on with Ganju. And now we have this entire other intrigue, and so both of them can pull at us separately. You know, we can, and the more that we delve into one, the more the other can be made more interesting for it, and the tension can be built and released, you know, simultaneously and alternatively. It's good stuff, and of course, should the two convene, I mean, that's good stuff. That's good writing. So whenever I talk about like Kubo really knows what he's doing with structure, that is a narrative structure building, and I mean, like, this is how TV shows are made. TV shows, you have an A and a B plot, they converge at the end in a way that's satisfying, and the one plot allows you to cut away from the other plot in interesting ways. That's like Rick and Morty makes meta jokes about that. You know, like it's so prominent. And so, yeah, maybe it's a natural plot, but it's not quite something that you see done so well in a manga, especially in a shonen battle manga, which is so very often just about like, okay, here's the cool fight. You know, here's this cool encounter. We're going to hype up this encounter. You know, someone's probably going to drop to somebody to set up how amazing and strong they are. And then we're going to have to fight the amazing strong guy. And then the hero's going to seem like they're going to lose. And they get some sort of interesting, cool, whatever. Something happens. They win or they escape. And that's so rote. That's so done. That's so over with it. Sorry, my throat's getting scratchy. I bring up my punching bag from the other week. No, I'll bring up Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer has this really great moment that I think exemplifies this, where just like structures in manga that I think need to kind of not be used unless you're intentionally poking fun at it anymore, just because it's been done so often. But there's a part in Demon Slayer where like this one guy, you know, he shows up and he's like one of the other demon slayers, and he's like, "Oh man, I'm so excited to kill these demons. They're just pathetic children. Haha, I'm such an asshole." And then he immediately gets killed. It's like, I know that this guy, like, the second that guy opened his mouth and showed up and had a design that was forgettable, I was like, oh, that guy's gonna get killed to show how cool and powerful this enemy is. So the enemy could kill someone, you know, look at their lethal power. But then this guy's also gonna be an asshole, so you don't feel that bad about him dying. And it's like, what? How to completely deflate like the situation, you know? Like if you're gonna wound or kill a character, like, it doesn't matter if it's someone that has just been introduced that we don't care about. Like, all that does is, yeah, sure, it shows off your character is powerful or whatever, but like, I assume if the main character is going to struggle against them, then we're going to understand the scope of their power anyway. So I don't know. It feels pointless. It's like jokes level of sophomoric writing, and not that Bleach is free of it, but certainly I think it handles its encounters a little bit better. But when I talk about writing these structures, that's what I mean. I think, you know, you think about like, okay, why do you include these elements in your story? What are they adding? What are the limitations of them? What is spending the time for this really doing? And I at least for the very least, I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of the Bleach manga, so its structures work for me. So I'm going to give them praise as long as they work for me. I know there's later structures that don't, and there's later uses of the structure that don't, or at least they didn't when I was younger, and I'm interested to get to those parts too. But this video is I told you it was going to be a little longer once. I love the absolute, like, goofed expressions on both Ichigo and Ganju as they get their skulls crushed in. This is also a great panel of just the reactions of everybody. I love Yorichi up there. But yeah, I like that she gives Ganju this big knockin as well, and I like this also helps to kind of parallel Ichigo and Ganju in a way. Like I said, I feel like Ganju is kind of like this lame parallel of Ichigo, like almost the way that other people might see Ichigo, without all the charisma that he has. Um, but Ganju almost feels like Ichigo fused with Keigo. Like now that I think about it, like you're Keigo Asano, right? Ichigo's friend from school, the kind of whiny pervert guy. Uh, I think, yeah, Ganju feels a lot like those two characters put together almost. But as we know, Keigo's one of Ichigo's friends, so maybe Ichigo is a little bit that way too. But I love that Kukaku's just running around kicking him in the face. I love this very serious expression that she gets here, and that she really lays down the law here with Ichigo. I love that she like just grabs his head and thump 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 thump, like runs over to the way to him and really lays down the law. It's good stuff. It also pulls a One Piece here, and her arm gums back to her, I suppose. Um, and I love, of course, the very serious, dire expression she has, and then immediately into this sort of chibi mode as she's like, "Yeah, okay, cool, as long as you get it." And so, of course, like this moment of relation as Ichigo and Ganju on the floor, like Ganju's just bleeding out over here and crying. I love the run of both of his blood and tears. Is he's like, yeah, she's kind of scary. Like, yeah, no wonder Ganju does what she wants because she doesn't put up with his BS. I think. Uh, which Kukaku, pretty cool character. I love that we go into this big underground facility. We get the mention of these plants that help power this, the Hotaru Kazura, which I ran into that word whenever I was reading this. I was like, oh, what? um, yeah, and like just interesting stuff, all lit up, which is I think kind of cool. This idea of maybe like a photoconductive plant or an electricity generating plant, something like that. But you got to wonder like how Soul Society is powered, how Soul Society functions, and it's interesting that it has like these different kind of things going on. We finally come to this central part of the basement, and we get the bottom of that smokestack, and now we have this large pillar in the middle of the room. And I love that it's given this sort of prominence as we roll down the page and we see all of our characters approach it. And yeah, we finally get the plan, right? She's going to shoot them into Seirite through the air because she's a prior works expert. And so, as mentioned before, like on the cover of the volume, she has a bomb in her mouth. She's the fireworks expert. So she's essentially going to just make them into fireworks and shoot them into the Soul Society over the wall. And I love that. And yeah, all of a sudden, like her tattoo being like sky makes a lot of sense. Um, her having an entire arm missing makes a lot of sense if she's constantly blowing stuff up. Also, kind of interesting and worth mentioning is that the Shiva family quickly are being established to have these sort of elemental powers. So Ganju, he could, or at the very least, Ganju we know has some sort of reishi manipulation, right? He was able to turn the ground into sand and shove Ichigo's sword into it. And now we have Kukaku, and she has this power over fireworks, or at the very least, she has this affinity for fireworks. And so I think that's significant that like they have this sort of earth and fire to them, which is I don't know, it's cool theming at the very least. Um, but yeah, that's it for that volume. We get a little bit on Byakuya and all of his swag, of course. His his scarf costs as much as 10 houses, and he likes spicy food. Um, Renji's got he likes taiyaki and has eyebrow tattoos. But this is also it qualifies that like it's from his combat ability that he was brought to the 11th, and then eventually he was made assistant captain to the 6th. And you have to wonder how like is it just because he worked really well alongside Byakuya? Is it because he had that connection to Rukia? And in some small way, Byakuya was sort of like bringing in and vetting Renji in a way. It's unsure. I don't know exactly the terms of that connection. I don't think that that's really been expressed for us. Maybe it has at this point. But it's interesting that this idea is brought to us that you can change divisions. That once you're in Soul Society, you're not like married to whatever division you're in. Like you can kind of, if you prove yourself in one way or another, you'll be shuffled around to these other divisions that fit you better, right? So it seems like the fifth division is good at like cultivating that talent. Maybe because Aizen does seem like a perceptive person. Maybe he's able to recognize that talent in other people. But then quickly, Renji, because this fighting ability was found in him, he was moved to the fighting division. And then for whatever reason else, he was promoted into the vice captain position for the sixth division. And I wonder if the position just got opened up. Maybe the person that was there retired or died. Something happened to them, and so it's like, well, we need somebody, and maybe Renji had been proving himself at the time. We do get like that he was really busting his ass to get these promotions. That's something we got at the beginning of the volume, I believe. So kind of interesting. Nevertheless, that is it for this volume. All in all, talking about. Oh, of course, I love the different. I love the love letter one. That's like my favorite one. But all of them are pretty good. The champions, fantastic. But yeah, overall, I love this volume. Obviously, I love the Soul Society arc. I think it is what comes to define Bleach. These characters, these captains. Like, really, this is where Bleach starts to define an aesthetic beyond just like real world shenanigans. It very much is reminiscent of Yu Yu Hakusho in a lot of ways, and I think not just because Yu Yu Hakusho deals with the death of a gangster protagonist who then becomes a spirit detective because one of Hell's envoys has to sign him up, and then it turns out that it's more of a bureaucratic job than an actual just busting ghosts makes me feel good. And then they end up having to go on big adventures alongside some unexpected allies, and then it quickly becomes a big thing about more than just those initial ghost busting sort of bureaucracy, and more about the larger scope of things. But where Yu Yu Hakusho quickly becomes battle tournaments the series, Bleach I think tries to maintain a more narrative focused kind of plot moving forward. I think it's a lot of people will write off Bleach. It's like, oh yeah, it's just ripping off the Yu Yu Hakusho, and it's like, well yeah, dude, anything's good. Like Kubo was writing this whenever he was like 18 or whatever. Of course he's going to be inspired by other stuff that's out. He's going to want to do his take on like all the things that inspired him. I mean, you could talk about how much Naruto is derivative of Hunter x Hunter or Dragon Ball. You could talk about the same sorts of things for One Piece. I don't know what One Piece is. I don't know if I've read enough One Piece and have enough insights to tell you what One Piece is drawing from. Probably Dragon Ball. I don't know. They both do have I like to eat a lot. I'm kind of an idiot protagonist joins up with a crew of other people to go on big adventure. So it's probably just all Dragon Ball, honestly. And I think that's maybe one of the things that makes Bleach a little refreshing, at least at the time, was that you have these other than all the other differences, and the Bleach feels a little bit more mature in its scope of its content and its theming for sure, and the type of story it's trying to tell, but also just in the idea that the protagonist of Bleach is kind of a relatable guy that is likable and interesting, and not just I don't know, some hungry food, basically not just Goku but not, because oh boy is Naruto and Luffy both Goku but not. Like, oh, what do you mean? Naruto, when it's the full moon, turns into an ape? Who knew he has a demon inside of him? Ah, like he's isolated from society and he's kind of dumb, but he has a good fighting spirit. Huh? You know, yeah. Sounds like a certain monkey I know. Anyway, I talk shit about these other series. I think Naruto and One Piece have a lot of great things going on. They have interesting members of their cast too. There's a lot of stuff that they do really well. There's a lot of things that they don't do very well. But this isn't a series about those. I just want to talk about Bleach in relation to them because they are such powerful contemporaries. The big three, right? Always gets mentioned. But I bring all this up to kind of talk about the ways in which Bleach was operating differently. And certainly, I think Bleach has a lot more in relation to something like Yu Yu Hakusho than it does Hunter x Hunter, or than it does with, especially with Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball, especially. Which, Dragon Ball, amazing. Like, I love that manga. Uh, After the Frieza arc's over with, I'm kind of done with it, but I love that manga. And I especially love a lot of the early stuff and the adventure kind of aspect of it. And like the fighting tournament stuff's neat, but I think in a lot of ways, fighting tournaments are so easy to write and get to the kind of like, I want characters fighting characters, a cool action, with like an excuse to kind of get characters in these battles. That often ends up being the way that a lot of series will go. So like, really, once Dragon Ball started doing a lot of fighting tournaments, it became doing a lot of fighting tournaments within like larger arcs that would burst out of that. And then it kind of became fighting tournaments all the way down, sort of. Not as bad as Yu Yu Hakusho does, oh boy. Yu Yu Hakusho is even worse about it. And I think Bleach avoids being strictly, like, it's never explicitly a fighting tournament as much as it is, you do have these moments where it's like, they're clearly setting up this faction of people. They all have weapons and unique abilities. They're probably going to have to do some fights. So, you could argue that's kind of a tournament structure, but never does it really quite hit it as hard as those other ones do. Anyway, let's talk about spoilers. I'm like an hour 20 into this video. I'm still not even on the spoilers and connections, of which, of course, you can imagine there are quite a few. Let's get to it. Jeez, this might be the longest video that's going to go on my channel. That's terrifying. Anyway, here we are. We start off. We come in here. It's as we know. We know that Aizen's manipulating the Central 46 to have everything moved up. He probably is He's probably the one that decided that Rukia would be kept in the Six Barracks and then transferred by Renji in the first place. Like Aizen's pulled all these strings to make essentially this happen, right? Now, I like that even within the scope of that, Renji can still have this moment with Rukia, and that can still be as pure a moment as it is, and like not really something that I don't think Aizen anticipated him telling Rukia that. I love this moment where he thinks about Gin intercepting Ichigo, and if Ichigo really still could be alive, because again, it speaks towards like if Gin's intent was to kill Ichigo, he absolutely would have. I mean, he would have shot him to death. It's Shinso, it's over. And so it makes me wonder if and that's something that I will continue to wonder, and I hope that I can actually clear up for myself on this reread. Did Gin go to stop Ichigo at the wall because he knew that Ichigo would get killed if he entered Soul Society or Seirete this early on? Or was Gin sent there by Aizen specifically to keep Ichigo and company outside of the Seirete until Aizen faked his death? Or maybe a little bit of both, Maybe a little bit of both. Because we know that Aizen has had a hand in Ichigo's entire life. Like, Aizen plotted the entirety of, like, all of this to the point of Ichigo being here. And Aizen wants Ichigo to go through the battles that Ichigo is going to go through in order to develop in the ways that he wants Ichigo to develop. Because one thing to kind of keep in mind is that the entire plot of Bleach is like a game of like chess with Ichigo as the pawn between both Urahara and Aizen, right? That both of them are trying to influence Ichigo's actions one way or another and develop in one way or another. And so I think Aizen, like even here, his whole plot is to get the Hogyoku, right? And to transcend, just being a Shinigami for all this power. But I think part of him has to recognize that Ichigo's already transcended just being a Shinigami through Urahara's training. So it's like, oh, my opponent's gotten this one up on me, I think that's kind of interesting. I think at any point, Aizen could have killed Ichigo if he wanted to, and certainly Gin could have. And so you have to wonder how much, is Aizen trying to keep Ichigo safe to an extent and to cultivate the sort of battles Ichigo gets into? I don't know, I'm not quite sure. It's hard to say. I mean, I'm certainly of the mind that the Hogekyu is like Hogekyo is sort of manipulating a lot of things too, and responding to the strong will of the people around it to kind of help to manifest things for them. And that's why Ichigo tends to have such a huge increase in power over the course of the Soul Society arc. But yeah, it's curious, you know. I certainly that's one of the points of interaction that I'm hoping gets kind of cleaned up, or you know, that I can figure something out on this reread. Of course, here's Aizen intercepting Renji so that he can plant these seeds of doubt with Renji. And I wonder to like what extent Aizen, you know, because certainly Renji ends up trying to kill Bayakua, right? And I wonder if Aizen's just trying to sow like conspiracy and discord among the Shinigami in this moment. Like, what's his goal, right? Because he's certainly trying to plant these moments of doubt in Renji, and I mean certainly Renji. I like this moment of like, you know, it's been a long time. I lost you to Kenpachi, right? The idea that maybe Aizen was grooming Renji to be his subordinate, and you know, eventually lost him because, as we know, Aizen surrounds himself with people that are not content with Soul Society, right? Because Aizen doesn't like the structure of things how they are. Aizen wants to sit upon the throne at the top. He wants to instigate change with his own hands. And so he surrounds himself with allies like Gin and Tosin. But I wonder if he also saw that in characters like Kira, Momo, and definitely Renji, right? Certainly Renji had that same sort of like maybe doubt. And we know that Renji came from the Rukon guy, right? So maybe Aizen, in a way, thought that he could make an ally out of Renji, and is still trying to use Renji as a resource now, even if he won't be like at this point in the manga. Like Aizen, you know, Aizen since the turn back the pendulum has been rolling deep with his cadre. Like Renji was never going to be a part of that group, that trio. But I think part of that is, you know, maybe he could have been cultivated into that. Maybe he could have been made an underling of some sort. And so I think the line of like "I lost you to Kambachi" is really interesting. I think that's a fascinating line that, you know, again, I think I really underestimated like a lot of the subtleties of Renji and his place in the world of the series, because I always kind of imagined him as like, oh yeah, he foiled Ichigo, he has to have all these sort of battles, Ichigo affects him and brings him over to his side, very similar to the sort of ways that Ichigo affects like an antagonist on every story. So it's like, yeah, he brings over Uryu, yeah, he brings over Renji, yeah, you know, like he ultimately has this effect on kind of on Grimjow, sort of, maybe. I don't know. But Nell, definitely. So there's, I don't know, there's this, I mean, Nell's not really an antagonist, but nevertheless, like there's this constant, like, Ichigo kind of winning over someone on the other side. It doesn't really happen in the Thousand Year Blood War. Spoilers for people who haven't. Thousand Year Blood War is a Thousand Year Blood War, baby. Ain't time for friendship. No Nakama here. We gotta get to war. Anyway, um, of course, I like that the Gigai does get mentioned again. Um, but here's something. Now, here's something that the Hell Arc in relevance to this makes me think about. Because the Sokyoku is reserved for killing captains that are transgressors. And as we know, a captain class, you know, Shinigami has such dense reishi, whatever. Basically, they have to be sent to hell. So I wonder if the Sokyoku is a part of that, like, ritual to send them to hell. And then whenever I think about that, I think about, like, you know, okay, well, you have this holding cell for them to repent. Because earlier, whenever I was thinking about the repentance, I'm like, why would they repent? And obviously, I couldn't mention it then, but obviously, they're going to repent because they're going to hell. You know, if you're being executed in Soul Society by the Sokyoku, you're a captain, which means you're going to hell. You're not going back in the incarnated cycle. And the fact that that's something that we wouldn't know until like 10 years later is revelatory, right? That like and like it's like small. It's like, whoa, oh yeah, that's why you have a repentance tower. That answers that question. Because literally you have been, and it's a secret too, but like you have been marked to go to hell. Basically, you can go and repent further in hell. That's fascinating, right? That's kind of interesting, right? Now that said, the Sokyoku is supposed to completely and utterly destroy you, but I still imagine that you incarnate in hell, or that like that sort of same ritual, like the hollow hunting ritual, gets done to essentially banish your reishi to hell because it's still too dense. Because the Sokyoku could just deal with that dense spiritual body that you had, then they would have just used that on like Jushiro and Yamato, Genryusai, and all of them, right? So, well, the Sokyoku does get destroyed, doesn't it? Huh. Interesting. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, right? Is the Sokyoku sending people to hell, or is it completely evaporating them like a Quincy would a whatchamacallit, a hollow? I don't remember. I'm gonna have to go and look that up after this, or at least wait till the part where they'll start talking about the Sokyoku. I mean, I know that because Aizen's plan was to have Rukia executed by the Sokyoku because that's how he was going to essentially get the whatchamacallit. That's how he's going to first not only get rid of her, but also get his hands on the Hyogekyo, and then he ultimately doesn't get to do it that way because things go not as planned. But yeah, it's curious, right? It is curious, and I think that interpretation that I have might be valid, and that if so, that's something that I haven't heard anyone kind of come to the conclusion of. So I'm kind of giddy just thinking about it. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna go look that up after I finish this read. After we're finished with that, because that does excite me, and that's again part of the reason why I'm rereading Bleach is to have moments like that, or like that moment whenever like realize like that moment of that interaction with Renji there, and like with the context that I have and knowing more about story structure and spending a little bit more time with the manga and these like close-in expressions and really reading into it, like being able to get more out of this thing I like is a lot of fun. And hopefully it's been fun for you too. But yeah, I got all giddy because I also thought we were going to see all the captains in this one. It's not till next volume. I don't think that we really have much else to say about the others. There is kind of a cool moment here where, of course, like I love that she's beating them around, which familial abuse seems pretty common in the Shiba household. I wonder if that's where Ishin gets it from. Just like beating around your children or your siblings, and that's why he beats up Ichigo so much. I mean, it helps to train him too. But in these moments, actually, I also realized that Kakushiba resembles Karen a lot as well. I see a lot of black-haired Karen in that. Certainly, or Karine, Ichigo's sister, and I wonder if that's intentional. We did get those 10-year later designs of them, so maybe I'll have to also go look at that design too and see how she stacks up. Not in that way. Come on. Anyway, I love that we get this underground place full of light. Notably, I was thinking about the 1,000-Year Blood War in this moment because we have this like huge lit up corridor, and I wonder if this is the same sort of paneling that Mayuri later uses to create his rooms of light. I'm not so sure, but that would be cool if that was a detail that did come up later. But that's why Kukaku was perfectly fine during the invasion of Soul Society by the Quincy. There weren't no shadows in her basement. Ignore the shadows in this one, but I don't think there are any. But yeah, so she had a perfectly safe place all along. Otherwise, yeah, I don't have really much else going on here to discuss. That's the big and small of it. Lots of cool things in this chapter, though. Lots of really great moments. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this a lot. As always, this has been a good time. I really enjoy you sitting through, especially these longer ones. I know Aizen got introduced this chapter, y'all. Anyway, like we're finally getting into the Seirei. Like we had so much good stuff, so much good stuff here and ahead. I'm very much looking forward to it. As always, please give the video a like if you've gotten this far. Just let me know that you've gotten this far. I love engagement in the comments. I like talking to people. If you leave a comment, I'm probably going to respond to it. If should these videos ever get to the point where I'm getting hundreds of comments, I'm going to try to indulge everybody and respond to all those. I like talking about Bleach, obviously. Um, but if you like Bleach and if you like what I'm doing here, you like this series, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can support for as little as you like, and all the people that you're seeing here are the people that are supporters as of making this video. I am a huge fan of you guys. Thank you so much. And, if you're interested in that, if you're interested in giving this channel that extra support, the link for that is in the description for every one of these videos, as well as in the channel description as well. But you can follow me on Twitter. I try to post updates there. For instance, while doing this weekly, the previous video had a rendering issue, and I wasn't able to get up on time. So I was able to post on Twitter ahead of time, like, hey, there's not going to be an episode today. We'll have to tomorrow, that kind of thing. So I also post, like, whenever there's any interesting Bleach news there, too. I try to share stuff. I try to share the video links if you don't want to subscribe on YouTube for whatever reason, or if you just prefer to see those on Twitter. They're there, too. But nevertheless, consider any one of these avenues of supporting the channel, especially if you watch an hour and a half of this. Thank you. I mean, I like talking about Bleach. I don't know if you enjoy listening to me talk about it, but if you do, I really do appreciate it. As always, I have been your host, Carter Gold, and I am reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.